So, greetings, dear friends. Welcome to the Sutta study group. And we're going to look at some suttas from Vedana Samyutta, chapter on feelings in Samyutta Nikaya, just as we have been doing the last couple of weeks. But before we begin, let's take some time to settle into the space and we can meditate together silently for the next 10 minutes or so. Welcome again, dear friends. Thank you for bringing your mindfulness into this space. It's good to start with a bit of time of meditation so that we can arrive in a nice, peaceful way and bring our sati sampajanya to bear on the sutta study. So we're doing the Vedana Samyutta, working our way through these wonderful suttas on feelings. And actually last week we missed out one of the suttas, the one I actually had in mind for you, Ruwanthi. We missed, so we're gonna backtrack to sutta number 4 in this section to start with. And the suttas, as we know in the Samyutta, are a little bit shorter than in the Majjhima or Digha Nikaya, so I have a few lined up for today, and we'll just see how far we can go with them. No rush, obviously. We'll take our time. So let's begin with the first sutta for the session. Putting up the screen share, and we're going to look at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Here we are. We're going to alternate between Bhikkhu Bodhi and Sujato Bhikkhu for these translations, so we get a feel of the subtle differences between translators. So now I'd like you to relax and maybe close the eyes. I'd like to read this entire sutta all in one go, and then we can see if we'd like to have some discussion around it. So just tuning into the listening faculty, listening with the whole body. Allow me to read you the bottomless abyss. Samyutta 36.4. The Buddha speaking. And he says, when the uninstructed worldling makes the statement, in the great ocean there is a bottomless abyss, such a person makes such a statement about something that is non-existent and unreal. Rather, this is a designation for painful bodily feelings, that is, bottomless abyss. When the uninstructed worldling is contacted by painful bodily feeling, such a person sorrows, grieves, and laments, weeps and beats their breast and becomes distraught. This is called an uninstructed person who has not risen up in the bottomless abyss, who has not gained a foothold. But when an instructed, noble disciple is contacted by a painful bodily feeling, such a person does not sorrow or grieve or lament. They don't weep or beat their breast or become distraught. This is called an instructed noble disciple who has risen up in the bottomless abyss, who has gained a foothold. One who cannot endure the arisen painful feelings, bodily feelings that sap one's life, one who trembles when they touch them, a weakling of little strength, who weeps out loud and wails. Such a person has not risen up in the bottomless abyss, nor have they even gained a foothold. But one who is able to endure painful arisen feelings, bodily feelings that sap one's life, one who trembles not when they touch them, such a person has risen up in the bottomless abyss, and they have also gained a foothold. So there we are. Quite a powerful image, isn't it? And how relatable is that for us? Any of us, all of us who have experienced, severely painful feelings, intense, unpleasant feelings, the bottomless abyss. It's interesting that the Buddha says that this is not something real in the external world. I guess we could debate about that, but we can take the Buddha's word for it that this is a more important way to use this simile or relate to this concept of a bottomless abyss. We can feel in our own experience how we can kind of be taken to such places through our bodily experience, and how we can skillfully relate when we find ourselves in such places. And this is a strong teaching, isn't it? It's, very direct and very challenging perhaps at times, but this is the way to go. This is the way forward, and not to waste our time adding to our suffering, but to be really interested, isn't it? Really curious, and focus on the awareness rather than the reactivity, I guess. So this is my short reflection on this teaching, and I'd be very interested to hear from others. Any questions, reflections, thoughts about this teaching and how it can relate to our practice? How do we make it applicable for ourselves? Linda.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wondered, when you were reading it, is this specifically about like severe depression, or is it any kind of feelings that you feel like you're in a pit and you can't get a foothold and climb out? But I got the impression it was more about severe depression. But I'm not sure if it's specific or if it's general. Just curious if it's what they were kind of driving at there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda. I mean, I think what's really helpful about a group of wise people coming together and looking at the suttas is that we will have different readings. We'll have different. It will create different impressions for us, and it's really helpful to hear about how others understand these teachings. And yeah, I mean, one could say, what is the bottomless abyss for me? How can I relate to that? Do I know that? Is there something here where this teaching actually is speaking to me? And depression, indeed. I mean, I take it myself more like straightforwardly, just that the Buddha's talking about painful feelings in the body. So my actual sense was, when there's really racking, painful, intense feelings, which we can experience in illness, can't we? But also for some people, for some of us, it's like a constant, almost daily experience of, say, if we have arthritis or we have a lot of pain in the body when we sit to meditate. But I was sensing more in that simple way, any kind of painful feeling. But I really think what you said is helpful, Linda, because the bottomless abyss really becomes apparent when we're maybe dealing with relentless difficulty. And depression certainly an example of that, isn't it? Where we're relentlessly feeling a certain way that is painful. And that feeling in depression can be one of endlessness, can't it? Like there's no end to this. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. And so I feel that, Linda, this sutta is speaking to people who struggle with depression. Perhaps this could be a very helpful guide for them, for us.
The other might be like someone who's struggling with drug addiction and things like that. But, because it's basically this crying and wailing and beating of the breast. Of course, I've heard that line before in other scripture, but something about not wanting to be touched or something to that effect. And that's what made me think about depression or addiction, because, but it's probably more of a general, as you said, more a general thing, but it just, there's some things, some descriptions there that sounded made like something like that, where someone is trying to climb out of a situation and they can't get a foothold, which sort of like goes beyond just, I don't know, pain in your knee or something, which, I mean, I have that, but it's like, I don't feel it's like an abyss that I'm trying to climb out of. So it has to be something more, maybe more emotional or more severe than that. So anyway, that was just my interpretation, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for that, Linda. I really appreciate what you're saying, because it is like true and valuable to appreciate that physical pain. Often we do work with it very well, and it doesn't overwhelm us. And it's just sometimes, isn't it? There can be the experience of moving into emotional responses and moods, heavy, sort of sustained moods around our experience. And this is much more that sense of the bottomless abyss. You mentioned addictions, how people feel when they're battling addictions. Absolutely. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks.
Great reflections. Anyone else like to come in and share any thoughts on this teaching of the bottomless abyss? Kusala, yeah.
Thank you. Hi. So much spoke to me around the second arrow and how that is just that's the big thing, the proliferation in the mind and the, I shouldn't be feeling this, and this is always going to be that way, just that, all of that second arrow, like the initial suffering, this seems so small in compared to what my mind can do around it, just it's all out of proportion. This the incident or the occurrence of the suffering should be the big thing, but it's not. It's in the picture, it's such a little thing, but my mind makes it the big thing.
Sadhu. Yeah, thank you, Kusala. That's really beautiful to connect this with the second arrow teachings. And I actually think there's a sutta in this section which is on that topic. So it'd be really good when we come to that to more deeply explore that simile from the Buddha. But that's it, isn't it? It's really, I guess, here the Buddha's talking about, when he talks about the uninstructed worldling and a noble disciple, he's talking about the distinction, right, between, just accepting the way things are, first arrow, painful feelings are present in this moment. And then the uninstructed worldling who, we have a painful feeling. It's like, how long is it going to last? I can't stand this. What's the matter with me? And the mind going off into worry and anxiety and despair and depression. There it is. And it's that distinction really, Kusala, isn't it? You've clarified it's the it's the two possibilities. One is to stay with just the first arrow, and the other is allowing a second arrow to come and penetrate and add so much to our suffering. And really, that's the bottomless abyss. I think it's interesting here, maybe to consider that the Buddha's also, I found this sort of strangely comforting, if you like, that the Buddha's also saying, look, physical pain can be very severe. It's like, yes, yes, I know that. For me, it's a place in the suttas here where the Buddha's actually pointing to the reality of painful feeling, that it's painful, that it's really painful. And I find it comforting, I suppose, because oftentimes in the suttas, it's simply put, painful, pleasant, neutral. It's almost very dispassionately put, which of course is extremely helpful for us. But here the Buddha is saying, actually, yeah, painful feeling, it can be, this is the actual bottomless abyss that you'll experience. Never mind bottomless abysses in the ocean, whether they exist or not. Painful feeling is just that. And yet how bearable, Kusala, right? When we're not making it anything more than what it is. Thank you for pointing that out. Anyone else like to come in before we move on to the next teaching? Do you remember last week, the sutta that we jumped to, the next sutta actually, where the Buddha is saying, pleasant feeling is painful. Do you remember? Pleasant feeling is painful. Painful feeling is a dart. I'm just reminded of that too. The dart of painful feeling, the bottomless abyss. Okay, excellent. Now we're going to look at number 6 sutta, and we'll look at Bhante Sujato's translation. This is, haha, Kusala. You might know these suttas. You might have read the Vedana Samyutta, and there they are, connected. These two suttas. This is the sutta now, 36.6, an arrow, Sala Sutta. Wonderful. So let's go through it. Reading obviously just the English, but you can see the Pali directly underneath. The Buddha speaking to a group of people. He says, an unlearned, ordinary person feels pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. A learned, noble disciple also feels pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. What then is the difference between a learned, noble disciple and an ordinary, unlearned person? And the people the Buddha is speaking to, they ask him, he say, our teachings are rooted in the Buddha. Please, will you explain the meaning of your question? Can you give us the answer? And the Buddha says, when an unlearned ordinary person experiences painful physical feelings, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. They experience two feelings, physical and mental. It's like a person who's struck with an arrow, only to be struck with a second arrow. That person experiences the feeling of two arrows. In the same way, when an unlearned, ordinary person experiences painful physical feelings, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. Though they experience two feelings, physical and mental. When they're touched by a painful feeling, they resist it. The underlying tendency for repulsion towards painful feeling underlies that. When touched by painful feeling, they look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures. Why is that? Because an unlearned ordinary person doesn't understand any escape from painful feeling apart from sensual pleasures. Since they look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures, the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling underlies that. So they don't truly understand feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape. I think I'm going to actually stop there, and we'll go back a little bit possibly when we resume looking at the sutta, because there's a lot there already. So here we have it, the simile of the two arrows. And it goes beyond that also, but maybe we can talk a little bit first of all about that tendency that we've been bringing in with the last sutta to add to our suffering, to add to, that is, the experience of painful feelings. And here, isn't it very clearly the Buddha's delineating, yes, there's the physical painful feeling, and then what we're adding is a mental component. We can call that reactivity, can't we? We can call that proliferation, papancha, this word in Pali, or imagination. And don't we know that? Personally, I find when I have painful feelings, especially if I'm feeling unwell with painful feeling, that feeling it's not right, there's something wrong, there's something amiss with the body, then it's very, very easy for the mind to go into worry and speculation. And the Buddha mentions here confusion. I'm not exactly beating my breast, but it's the same kind of thing. Isn't it? I'm not wailing and beating my breast, but in my mind, there is, this kind of, flavor, reactivity, and the worry, the anxiety, the stress, adding so much to the suffering, the simple suffering of some kind of malaise, or even to simplify further, some kind of painful feeling in the moment. So the second arrow, we can all, let's consider that and how we can relate to this simile from the Buddha. Any thoughts, reflections, questions at this point? The uninstructed worldly person and their response to painful feelings. Linda, please go ahead.
I really like this one. It helped me out a lot. And I didn't even know about this particular the sutta, but in the Mahayana one, they kept calling it the parable of the two arrows. And I couldn't find it. I finally found it by just searching arrow under the search engine of Sutta Central and found an arrow. I go, oh great, I found it. Because I was dealing with sort of a betrayal of trust from someone who I really liked and really got along well with. And I was having trouble, not so much getting over the first part, which is the first arrow, but I tend to relive it and go over conversations we had and things I did. And did I say or do something that this person didn't like? And is that why this happened? And then you just keep doing that and it keeps cycling constantly. And then I found this sutta and I go, that's it. I control this. I can control the second one. The first one I can't do. You can't control what people do to you, like whether it's emotional or physical or whatever. But the second one, that's you, and that you can control, and you can stop it from not taking over your life. And it was great, and it brought me, I still think about it, but and this is like, 6-7 months later, but it's not as painful as it was when I didn't have this and realized that I control that second arrow. I control whether it hurts me or it doesn't hurt me. And I was telling that in another group. We were talking about using Buddhist meditation for dealing with pain, whether it be physical or emotional. And I mentioned this sutta, and so it really kind of opens your eyes up to, the fact that you control this, that you don't have to suffer with this.
Sadhu. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that. Yeah, it's really wonderful to see how this applies, to so much of our mental turmoil. And as you say, when something difficult, traumatics happen, we tend to go over and over and over. And we can really take this sutta to heart and allow ourselves to cut through these cycles of really kind of self-torture in a way, isn't it?
Right. It turns out you don't realize it at the time, but it is. You're torturing yourself, and it keeps going, and you keep cycling month after month, and until you come to the realization, I've got to stop this, because this is just going to go on, and it's not making me feel any better, and I'm not learning anything from it, so I should just let it go. But it's hard to let it go, because it's like you want an answer and you don't have an answer, and that's what makes it cycle, because you're looking for an answer and there isn't an answer. Yeah,
like a hook that has to be let go of. Thank you so much, Linda. I see Kusala, but just before, Meredith, did you have a raised hand? Just checking. Okay. Kusala, go ahead. Thank you.
So how do you deal with a partner who likes to verbally do the second arrow on himself? I mean, so I try to go to that place of compassion, because he's just on and on, and you can feel his suffering because he's stabbing himself with the second arrow. And I just can just say, just let it go. You're causing yourself so much suffering, and I can go to that place of compassion, but it's somewhat, I'm going to use the word tiring, but that's not really what I want to say. It's frustrating, because I know what he's doing, but he doesn't have the teachings. I'll just throw that out. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kusala. That's a really good one, isn't it? I mean, a good conundrum for us. We have our own practice, we have our own dukkha, we're working with that. And then we can consider the people around us, and especially when we're in a very close relationship, of course, we're seeing so much, we're feeling so much, and we might have a sense of how they could practice, what would be beneficial, what would be so helpful for them. And then we can see how, that's a gift that can't just necessarily be given. And it's really quite poignant, isn't it, to sort of know sometimes, just how we might be able to support someone else with some wisdom, but that they're not, not interested, or they're owners of their own karma. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? And then I can appreciate how there's really a call for us, I guess, then to develop that sense of equanimity around what's possible and what's not possible. But how challenging, when we're with people all the time, and these things are playing out. I don't know. I guess there's a lot that can be learned from that. I often think the best teachers are not necessarily, I mean, there are two kinds of teachers. There are the great teachers who teach us Dharma and who teach us by their example how to free the heart and lead us on and encourage us. And then there are the teachers who, where we're seeing how, you know, like ways in which it's maybe better not to behave, or to see what roads I don't want to go down. And thank you for showing me that. You know, there can be an awful lot of giving in ways that one wouldn't necessarily consider a gift being given, but actually a gift is being given. When we see others who are struggling, we can learn so much because they're almost like doing it for us. They're saving us the job. There can be that kind of sense, can't there? And I'm sure also we can give others that opportunity, if you see what I mean. We may have blind spots ourselves, and you know, others can see what we're missing, and we'll save them maybe a lot of suffering by our example, showing them what not to do. So it's really kind of, just noticing, Kusala, the limitations here, and like, you know, where can we skillfully put our energy and put our attention and make the most of the limited time we have, kind of thing. Yeah, anything you'd like to come back with, Kusala, on this topic?
Yeah, just when you were sharing, it just came to me that it was a sort of a lesson in how I could be like that also. And when this is going on in someone's mind, just seeing how much suffering they are causing for themselves and how I could be there, but yeah, they're teaching me of the road I don't want to go down. And then it reaffirms the value of the teachings for me that, well, at least one of us is, you know, skillfully doing this journey through life. And it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kusala. Anyone else like to come in on this thus far in the sutta, on the second arrow? So we heard about the teaching relating to the second arrow around painful feeling, and also the aspect of how in the midst of our painful feeling we can also develop desire and greed for, you know, the next experience to not be painful. And that's very interesting. I'd like to go back to that and read over it again. Let's bring up the text again and just backtrack a little bit. Here we are. So another way in which the second arrow can manifest. When touched by painful feeling, we can look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures. Because of not understanding any escape from painful feeling apart from sensual pleasures. Since we look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures, the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling underlies that. So that's interesting. I'd like to stop there and just consider this teaching, this observation from the Buddha. Do we know this one? Got a yes in the room. We know that, you know, it's like, this is really uncomfortable. Okay, I don't want to be here with this, so I'll just start thinking about something else that I can get later on to cheer me up, to sort of actually just not be here. This kind of way of distracting. And I think it's very interesting that this is also, in a way, a second arrow for us. So fantasizing about pleasant feelings in the midst of our painful feelings. We can recognize this, can't we? Anagarika Patibhadar would like to share something. Let me just see if we can hear.
With my husband,
Can you hear?
there are times when I'm speaking with him and I can literally see him drift away. He's not even there with me. And, there are times when what I'm talking about and sharing is important to me, but it's not important to him. And so there's a choice that has to be made. Okay, if he can't hear me now, do I leave this alone and come back to it later? Or do I just accept he's not interested and let it go?
Thank you. That's a good one. Did you all hear Anagarika Patibhadar? Not brilliantly. Okay. I'll try and paraphrase. This is a good exercise. Can I paraphrase? So Anagarika Patibhadar brought in an interesting example from her experience of being with her partner, life partner, and sharing some information and watching while the other person drifts away and stops listening. And the question then came for Anagarika Patibhadar for the group. So what should I do in such a case? Should I be persisting while he's off somewhere else? Or should I just let it go, and maybe come back to it later? And
I have to let it go.
She says, I had to let it go. So there we are. We have the answer. That's that then. Sorted. But actually, thank you, Anagarika Patibhadar, for this example, because again, just as Kusala brought in, we can have the experience of this mind, and then we can have the experience of externally, the mind externally, the other. So I think these are interesting aspects of our experience to consider. We're looking at this mind, we're also looking at others, and we can see when someone's drifting away. What's he doing? He doesn't want to be here, so he's going somewhere else. And as it were, the body's present, but we can sense that the mind is elsewhere. So we can see when that happens with another and how to respond to that, to just come back to this one. And then when we have this experience ourselves, can we catch that? Can we learn from seeing that in the other to really noticing if we have that inclination to just just kind of move the attention elsewhere. Now look, sometimes it can actually be quite skillful to divert the attention. In the sutta on the dealing with distracting thoughts in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha actually says, sometimes if we're overwhelmed by negative thoughts, negative feelings, it's quite helpful. One of the strategies can be to simply look somewhere else, think of something positive to balance, to give some space around a difficult experience. And then we can come back to it when we're more resourced. He describes like taking a peg from a hole and replacing it with a different colored peg. Or simply in the same sutta, he describes just literally looking away, looking at something different. Read a sutta. I'm completely obsessed with some issue that I'm dealing with, and I'm feeling really negative, really anxious about it. Go and read a sutta. Go and listen to a Dharma talk, and so forth. So this can be both skillful and also unskillful. The most important point, I guess, is to know what we're doing, right? To know what we're doing and to choose the most supportive option for our practice.
There's also
Patibhadar speaking. She's very kindly coming a little bit closer to the mic, so that hopefully
There's,
hear the real.
there's also a sutta where a Brahmin approaches the Buddha and starts using abusive language. And the Buddha asked the Brahmin, he said, do you have guests who come to your house and they bring you a gift? And he said, when you go to someone's house, do you take a gift? And he said, well, yes, on both accounts. Well, Brahmin, you've brought me a gift here today, and I'm not interested in it. So I will just leave it with you. And that just made me realize we don't have to accept everything everyone is saying. Sometimes when we listen and our filters get hooked on a negative past memory, that in itself tells us we're not present with that one, what they're saying. We've already started another story. And so to be mindful and to be present in the importance of that is so critical. And to not bring all of these lenses into receiving information from another. Be aware of what's happening, where our mind is taking us when that happens.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Aniga. There we are. Just show you who's in the room while I've got the camera moving around. One of the other girl. So there's Vera. There are 4 of us. Did you all hear Aniga Kapadikada? Yeah, that's so helpful, isn't it? And to bring in this other wonderful teaching. The teaching on the giving of the gift from the Brahmin that the Buddha was not receiving, the gift of abuse, which he didn't need. It's a great teaching, that one, isn't it? So yeah, to see in others and to see in ourselves, and to be willing to pull out the second arrow, or better still, don't let the second arrow penetrate in the first place. Okay, let's go back to the sutta, everybody, and see what the next piece is for us. Okay. So speaking about the second arrow of adding to our pain with painful thoughts and feelings, adding to our pain with distracting into pleasant feelings, the Buddha says, in this way, we don't truly understand feelings' origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape. The underlying tendency to ignorance about neutral feeling underlies that. So that's huge, actually. My goodness. So let's just try and unpack this. I'll keep the teaching on screen so I can look at it myself and we can look at it together, because here the Buddha is saying, what is it we're not understanding? What is the underlying tendency to ignorance around feeling? Not understanding its origin, like where it comes from. Where does it come from? Cause and effect. Arising in the body, pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling. Can we allow it to be understood as that, not adding to it, not trying to get away from it? Feelings ending, that feelings are changing all the time, that there's no feeling that we can hold on to that will last for us. The gratification of feeling is the pleasant, experience of pleasant feeling. Yes, it can be gratifying at times, but the drawback that it doesn't last, that it changes. Pleasant changes to painful, painful changes to pleasant. There's neutral in between. Constant anicca, constant change. This is the drawback. And the escape, to simply be present for feelings as they are and not to get caught up in liking, disliking, or distracting from. So with neutral feeling, particularly, we can be unaware of these processes, because I guess at least with painful and pleasant feeling, we are able to recognize the tendency to react and to be able to let go of that. Neutral feeling has that quality, doesn't it, of kind of dulling out. So this is always an opportunity for us, I think, isn't it? When we have, just come back, when we have neutral feeling, there's not a sense of no drama, no pleasant, no unpleasant. The tendency to turn away from that, can we notice that, and can we really investigate neutral feeling? And it's almost as though we're investigating the quality of ignorance itself. We're waking up the mindfulness, sharpening the mindfulness, and becoming more aware of the subtlety here. The change, can we be aware of that? How things are changing and flowing? Can we be willing to rest in peace, the kind of peacefulness around neutral feeling? Waking up to that, familiarizing ourselves with that, developing a taste for that peacefulness. So there's so much there. I'll just invite anyone who wants to come in at this point with any questions, comments, reflections on that last little piece.
So
Smita.
I have this. Hi. So I had this question about the origination of feelings. So if you look at dependent origination, it says, contact is the cause of, feeling. So that's one point. And then the other point was, in the line that you read was to understand the drawback and escape. So my question is, how knowing the origination of the feelings can help you detach from them? So you see what I'm trying to say, like the origination is contact. So just knowing that, how can you detach?
Thank you very much, Smita, for bringing that in. I mean, that's hugely helpful to remember the Buddha's teachings on dependent origination. And why is there feeling? There's feeling because there's contact. And we can also just bring in and be so aware that what we're also talking about here is that what does feeling give rise to? It gives rise to craving. It gives rise to reactivity. And this is really the whole area that we're looking at. And thank you. Contact is the cause of feeling. So knowing that the 6 sense doors, receiving, contact, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. These contacts give rise to feelings, pleasant, painful, or neutral. And, it's so sort of scientific, isn't it, to see in this simple way, this is what's actually happening. So can I bring that to mind again and again and just allow myself to be informed by this teaching, so that tendency to feel like it's me and these experiences are very compelling. There's a kind of sense of wanting to dwell in the experiences or dive into the experiences and make them mine and try and manipulate them in different ways. Can I kind of pull back from all of that and just notice pleasant, painful, neutral feelings in relation to contact? And we can do this, of course. And this is the first arrow when they're painful, or even when they're pleasant. It's the first arrow. Even when they're neutral. Can we avoid the second arrow? Can we avoid moving from feeling, the sort of clarity and cleanness of contact, giving rise to feeling? We can observe, we can witness, we can know that, we can understand that. Can we be very mindful of the next chain in the link, independent origination, that feeling so quickly can lead to craving, to reactivity, to wanting and not wanting? And can we observe that and not get caught up in that? And of course, we definitely can. So thank you for bringing that in. And this whole dimension is really what the Buddha's pointing to in this sutta as well, isn't he? Anagarika Patipada is coming in.
Yeah, I'm here. Just coming a bit closer to the mic. Contact itself is an extremely complex process. When I observe what that means and what happens in this, I recognize that there's an arrow because there's a memory, there's a past experience, there is a history. If there wasn't any of that, there would be no arrow. There would be nowhere for the arrow to go. But because there's all of this past conditioning, that arrow gets in contact with a similar past experience, which triggers the history of the feelings that we experienced then. And then it clouds the entire experience we're having right now. So the contact itself is such a critical process in examining what it is and why. Because unless we can see the correlation between the historical experience and this one, we wouldn't be able to understand why the feeling arose.
Thank you so much. Very interesting observations from our experience there from Anagarika Patipada. That is really interesting. We can notice, can't we, that past experience. Yeah, that past experiences. Yeah, so like past experiences sort of coloring the present moment, and we can see that. We can see how there's like a sort of revealing process that can happen for us, and yet in this moment, what's actually happening is often quite simple, and this opportunity then that we have to kind of divest ourselves of all of that history, to sort of, to see it for what it is, and to really free up and come to a more and more place of simplicity. This is the first arrow. Yes, there's this experience right now, and we can really examine those second arrows. It's very interesting to note, isn't it, that in other places in the suttas, the Buddha talks about the second arrow, and he says in one sutta in Majjhima, he says he advises us, don't spend too much time examining the arrow, what it's made of, what kind of feather is in the tail, what the head is made of, what the, where did it cut and who made it and where was it made and where did you get it from and who shot it and what was the bow like and so on. The encouragement then, it very relevantly to what you're saying, Anagarika Patipada, isn't it? Then we're hearing the encouragement is not to get too interested in the past history. Don't get interested in it. It's there, it's arisen, and we can just let it flow by. And so I think we can remember that other teaching around the second arrow here, and that's so helpful. But
see it and let it go.
To see it and let it go, Anagarika Patipada says. Exactly. Sadhu, to see it and let it go. So isn't it the Buddha said not to get caught up in the past, not to move to the future? How wonderful that we can see in our practice how the mind will do this repeatedly, moving into the past, moving into the future, and how we know very well to not go there, not add anything to that, not get enticed, away from the present moment. Yeah, sadhu. Thank you, Anagarika Patipada. Anyone else like to come in at this point? Yeah, Linda, welcome.
Just a quick one. I was talking to a teacher yesterday, and it was more about karma, which is a caveat to this one, where it may not be just a memory from your recent past. It may be a memory from a past life. So you don't even realize it's there, and it's reacting on this time. But it's not like something, well, this happened to me 10 years ago, and that's what I'm reacting to. And it could be something from a past life as well. And I never even thought of that. I just think, I just think of like things that have been you experienced in your current life, and you don't think about things that may have happened in a past life and come somehow transferred over, and that feeling or that how you feel about that is still there, but you're not aware that it's even there.
Yeah, good point. I mean, sometimes we'll have things coming along and experiences arising. We have no idea. Where does that come from? And the very key point there, of course, Linda, yes, is we don't need to know. We don't need to make anything of it, really, just not to be hooked by these things, because it's a waste of time. Our time's so short. So just to be present is, so compelling for us if we're interested in liberation. So yeah, isn't it so true? Sometimes we have no idea what's going on. Never mind. Let's just watch the breath and see mind with mind in this moment. Thanks, Linda. Okay, let's go back to the Sutta and see what the next passage has for us. So the Buddha goes on talking about the worldly person, talking about the, tendency towards ignorance, shall we say, that we all have. If one feels a pleasant feeling, they feel it attached. If one feels a painful feeling, they feel it attached. And if they feel a neutral feeling, they feel it attached. It's this sense of attachment to feelings, that sticky quality of reactivity is what the Buddha's pointing to here. The second arrow. Such a person is called an unlearned ordinary one who's attached to rebirth, attached to old age, attached to death, to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. Who is attached to suffering, I say. So there we are. It's as clear as that. And I love that. I love that clarity. So if we attach to any kind of feeling whatsoever, we're not seeing the danger in it. and we're going to add to our suffering. But if we can avoid the second arrow, be present, witness, simply observe our experience, or the experience, I should say, then we're detaching, divesting ourselves of that huge mass of suffering. The Buddha's just described the entire mass of suffering right there, hasn't he? Birth, old age, sickness, death, pain, sorrow, lamentation, grief, and despair. Do we want that? And it's really interesting that, he can, in this very clear teaching, really encapsulate suffering in this way for us and give us the choice. Do we want that? Do we want to go there? Or do we want to take a different route? Do we want to choose to be free from suffering? So let's read on. The Buddha goes on to say, when a learned, noble disciple experiences painful physical feelings, they do not sorrow or wail or lament. They don't beat their breast. They don't fall into confusion. They experience one feeling, physical, not mental. It's like a person who's struck with an arrow, but not struck with a second arrow. That person would experience the feeling of one arrow. In the same way, when a learned, noble disciple experiences painful feelings, physical feelings, they don't sorrow, wail, or lament, beat their breast, or fall into confusion. They experience one feeling, physical, not mental. When they're touched by painful feeling, they don't resist it. There's no underlying tendency for repulsion towards painful feeling underlying that. When touched by painful feeling, they don't look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures. Why? Because they understand an escape from painful feeling apart from sensual pleasures. And since they don't look forward to enjoying sensual pleasures, there's no underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling underlying that. They truly understand feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape. The cause of feeling, contact, we can say, karma, we can say having a body, the end of feeling, its transience, the gratification in it, yes, it can be pleasant at times, momentarily, the drawback, its transient nature, and the escape from feelings. They understand all of this. We can understand all of this. There's no underlying tendency to ignorance about neutral feeling underlying that. So if we feel a pleasant feeling, we feel it detached. If we feel a painful feeling, we feel it detached. If we feel a neutral feeling, we feel it detached. This is a learned, noble disciple, detached from rebirth, from old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress, who is detached from suffering, I say. So this isn't quite the end of the sutta, but it's a good place, I think, to pause, just to take in this beautiful Dharma teaching, so clear. Not necessarily so easy to put into practice in every moment, but we have the guidance, don't we, here? And we can remember to just look out for the second arrow and put out the shield of mindfulness. Don't let it penetrate. Don't let it wound us. And to be, this word detached, to be able to step back. I think of it in terms of stepping back, making space, unhooking, not falling for reactivity, not giving it time, not giving it energy. It's a bit like training, isn't it? Training any kind of creature, like a child or an animal, we have to sometimes have boundaries and limits, to what is okay and what is not. And in our practice, we need to have these clear boundaries. When the mind starts to proliferate, move into resistance, move into reactivity, there's a clarity around, no, we don't do that. We're not going to allow for that. And we can have a kind of like a focus on noticing when we're overstepping a boundary in this way, and let the alert happen, let the alarm bells go off. We can see it, can't we, in day-to-day life, in our everyday interactions and experiences. We can feel reactivity and we can let it go. As soon as it's seen, as soon as it's manifesting, we can remember, no, this is not serving. This is not the path. This is the second arrow. Anyone like to come in with any comments on this passage? Such beautiful Dharma, worth reading and reflecting over again and again.
I have a question again.
Smita, yeah.
So I'm reading this sutta, and then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm also reading, dependent origination, and I understand how, that whole wheel is going on and on. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm reading these things, and then I'm telling my mind also that, okay, let's sit and meditate. So for maybe an hour or two, I'm able to block these distractions. But I'm not noticing that it's kicking off any detachment process. So I feel like I'm missing a key part of, the Buddha's instructions. Like, what am I missing? Why is the detachment process not, triggering, and why is it not, why am I not making progress there? You see what I'm saying?
Can you give me an example, Samyutta, of where you're not detached, where you're attached?
So, if I'm sitting down for meditation, then I can, let go those distracting thoughts. But again, as soon as you get up and do stuff in your daily life, first of all, even if you were mindful, there are times when you get overwhelmed and you're just drawn to that distraction. Like you said, you're just tempted. And, I feel like, okay, I can be mindful and I can still try to block it 24 hours, but it's not the same thing as giving rise to dispassion or being disenchanted with the feelings. So I feel like I'm missing something, that disenchantment towards feelings is not being developed. I can be mindful and block things for some time, maybe 24 hours too, but how do I give rise to dispassion, detachment, or disenchantment? That I need help with.
Thank you, Smita, very much for clarifying a little bit more. Yeah, it's not easy to necessarily to sort of jump to that place of clarity where we can see that, you know, there's no experience really that's worth holding to. And, you know, I'm not sure if there's a way that one can jump there through kind of intellectual or, you know, taking in teachings, hearing the words of the Buddha telling us, you know, really, you know, every kind of experience is actually fundamentally painful in its essence. It's pain, it's dukkha. I don't think we can really get to that place of knowing the truth of that intellectually. We can only get there through our own experience and through deeply attending to our experience moment by moment. And so my sense is that I really hear your spiritual kind of aspiration and intention there, and that you know where you want to be going, you know how your perception wants to be clarifying, and yet you know, we can't necessarily be there right now. I would say that it's probably fruitful to appreciate where you are now in your practice, to spend as much time as you can developing mindfulness, doing formal meditation, making time, making space to really look and see what's happening in terms of this body, feelings, mind, thoughts, to meditate, in short, and to take in the Buddha's teachings. And to, you know, there is a lot of value in this kind of experience of studying the teachings and hearing from the Sangha and, you know, kind of directing the intellect towards right view, and then practice. For people who have a lot of difficulties, health issues, bereavements, a lot of suffering in their worldly life, it's sometimes these experiences can be like a doorway to deeper understanding. It can be, you know, not so easy to really fully appreciate dukkha if our life goes well and we have good health and we're young and, you know, there's all sorts of good things happening. And it's not to knock that, you know, it's just that's where we are. We can only learn from our own experiences. And of course we can learn from others, but then that's our experience. And so I would say, yeah, it's wonderful that you're appreciating the Buddha's guidance around letting go, around developing dispassion, around the fading away of desire. And you're surely moving in that direction. And truly, the more that we can attend to our meditation practice and to really feel what's going on from moment to moment, then the more we're going to develop that dispassion. It's a given, you know, and it's just a matter of time. But also, this path is, for most people, a gradual one. And I would consider one more thing, which is you could open up to the practice of renunciation when we have a chance to let go of any kind of worldly pleasant experiences, it's very helpful to do that, to consider renunciation, consider how that can be practiced, consider what can be let go of, and consider ways in which it's possible to make more time for meditation practice. These could be helpful ways to just consider how you can develop at this point in your practice. And I hope that's helpful, Samyutta. Would you like to say anything more at the moment?
I would like to say thank you so much. I am going to keep practicing, and hopefully someday I will be able to develop this passion towards everything. Thank you.
I'm sure you will. I'm just reminded of the sutta, which, you know, is very powerful, was very powerful for me from quite a young age when I didn't understand it at all, but it had a very strong impact on me. The teaching where the Buddha talks about the 100 arrows, you know, that having a body, having a feeling body, it's like the Buddha says, the experience of contact is like being struck by 100 arrows, 100 spears, or 100 sticks in the morning, and then being struck by 100 spears, 100 sticks, also in the afternoon. And again, being struck by 100 spears, 100 sticks in the evening. And, you know, I remember reading that and first of all thinking it's a bit humorous, the way it's put. There's often a tinge of humor in the Buddha's teachings, but then really taking in this image, being struck by 100 blows, how horrendous, how shocking, how awful, really taking that in. And the Buddha's describing here, this is what it is to be a feeling being. So that's a good teaching to consider, to contemplate. And again, really, we can remember that our understanding of Dharma can happen at many different levels. And ultimately, it's the experience that is the great teacher for us. But these kinds of reflections can be very helpful. So thank you, Samyutta, for your excellent question and what it's opened up for us. So my dear friends, we're coming close to the end of the sutta group. I'd like to return to the sutta, Arrow Sutta, and just finish reading the last section, which I believe is coming into verse form for us to really summarize the teaching, I suspect. So the Buddha says, a wise and learned person is not affected by feelings of pleasure and pain. This is the great difference in skill between the wise and the ordinary. A learned person who has assessed the teaching discerns this world and the next. Desirable things don't disturb their mind, nor are they repelled by the undesirable. Both favoring and opposing are cleared and ended. They are no more. Knowing the stainless, sorrowless state, they have gone beyond birth, understanding rightly. So, my goodness. There we have it. And it's one of these instances for me where the Buddha's teachings are so sharp, so profound, so powerful. This very simple statement in beautiful poetical verse to not be affected, to not be reactive, to pleasant, painful, or neutral. That's the task. That is the way to freedom from suffering. Any comments, reflections, last points from anybody? I'd just like to read one more time to conclude this incredible verse. Both favoring and opposing, liking and disliking, wanting and not wanting, are cleared and ended. They are no more. Knowing the stainless, sorrowless state, one goes beyond rebirth, understanding rightly. There you are. So, dear friends, let's conclude with a homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Arahant Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantang Abhivatemi. Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Satipatthana Bhagavato Sawaka Sangha Sanghang Namami. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayya.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ayya.
Thank you so much, Venerable. Bye-bye.